1 Kings. All right, and the section that we have been in, the section that we were in our last class, is chapter 8. We had got into that section, verse 22 through verse 53. And what this is a long prayer of Solomon. Now, he's brought by way of reminder, and it's very instructive within this prayer. He's reminding the people of the covenant that God has established with them, their responsibilities to him, also what it is that he will do for them when they mess up in their lives. And actually what we looked at are these 7 scenarios, these different instances where they would wind up in sin. And each one of these scenarios, he provides them with the answer within the prayer. Now, he left it incredibly vague, right? What was the answer? Turn back to God. It's actually very clear. Completely joking. He makes it extremely clear within the text. Here's what you need to do. Anytime that you have sin in your life and you turn away from God, here's what you need to do. Turn toward this temple and pray to God and ask his forgiveness. And he started really with the idea if there are 2 people who have this problem between one another and one sins against the other, what was the solution? Pray. Ask forgiveness, right? Okay, well, he also says when the heavens are shut up and there is no rain because they have sinned against you, what's the answer? Pray. When there is famine in the land, what's the answer? Pray. Moreover, concerning foreigners who might turn toward this temple, what are they going to do? They're going to pray. Even going a little further, when we go out into war, when we go out where God has sent us and we fight these battles, on our way out, what are we going to do? Pray. And then if it is the case, and this is kind of where we were at when we left off, if it is the case, and he states within the text in verse 46, let's see, I said verse 46 without actually looking to see if that was the spot, so let me double check that. Yes, verse 46, when they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin. He says, look, if it is the case that we sin against you and we are out in battle, and it is the case that our enemy overtakes us and then he presents this idea that they might take us away captive. What's the solution? Pray. Turn back to God. There is a heavy emphasis throughout chapter 8 of 1 Kings of all of these different scenarios that they might find themselves in. And the answer always remains the same. Pray to God. And he gave a very detailed, very descriptive way of what has to take place with that individual. Verse 47 and verse 48, just skimming through that, it says, when they come to themselves. A little further within that same verse, when they repent, when they make supplication to you, saying we have sinned and done wrong, we have committed wickedness. Verse 48, return to you with all of their hearts and with all of their soul, pray to you. That's the answer. Still the same answer today. What is interesting, if you really kind of look in at this chapter, do you know it kind of provides us with a little bit of what's going to take place throughout the rest of Kings? All of these scenarios that Solomon has just mentioned are things that they're actually going to face. They're going to run into all of these problems, but God's forgiveness is still there. As long as they are willing to turn back to him, to repent wholeheartedly and pray to the temple. This point of mediation between him and his people. So that catches us up. Now we're going to pick up in verse 49, and I can say with all confidence we're going to get through this prayer this evening because there's only like 5 or 6 verses left. We're going to get through this prayer. All right, if somebody will, go ahead and read verses 49 through 53 for us.
Then hear in heaven your dwelling place their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. Am I in the right spot?
Yes, sir.
All right. And forgive your people who have sinned against you, and all their transgressions which they have transgressed against you, and grant them compassion before those who took them captive, that they may have compassion on them. Well, is that where you want
Through
to
53.
Okay. I just don't have my glasses. I can't see the numbers.
You want to borrow mine?
I'm taking a wild guess here. For they are your people and your inheritance, whom you brought out of Egypt, out of the iron furnace, that your eyes may be open to the supplication of your servant and the supplication of your people Israel, to listen to them whenever they call to you. For you separated them from among all the peoples of the earth to be your inheritance, as you spoke by your servant Moses, when you brought our fathers out of Egypt. O Lord God.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so leaving verse 48, this is, here's when they finally do realize, okay, we really messed up. We're in sin. We're in this situation that we're in because of our sin. We want to turn back to God. We're praying to God. And here's the expectation, verse 49. Hear in heaven your dwelling place, their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. Now, even the idea of maintaining their cause, I think, ties down to verse 53, for you separated them from among the other peoples, right? This is his chosen people. And as long as they continue to turn back to God, he will continue to maintain their cause. Now, this last scenario that we actually left off in, the last one that was presented by Solomon, this idea of being taken away captive, this really should have been something that might have been in their minds a little bit. This should have been something that might have rung a bell, something that they have heard before. Somebody jump back and read Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 16 through 18 for us. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 16 through 18. Do you remember what Moses actually warned them about in some of his final farewell words to the nation as he's preparing them to go into the promised land, right? Look what Moses says, Deuteronomy 31, verses 16 through 18.
And the Lord said to Moses, Behold, you will be blessed of your fathers, and this people will rise and play the harlot with the gods of the foreigners of the land. For they go to be among them, and they will forsake me and break my covenant which I have made with them. Then my anger shall be aroused against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured. And many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, Have not these evils come upon us, because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day, because of all the evil which they have done, in that they have turned to other gods.
There was always the warning, all the way back to the time that Moses was still giving them instruction. Before Joshua had led the nation into Israel, into the promised land, there was this warning that guess what? There's coming a time, a little bit of a prophecy, if you will. There's coming a time where they're going to turn away from me, and I will hide my face from them. Somewhat interesting, even within this prayer of Solomon, is he is there before all of the people, the entire nation, and he's praying to God, and he throws this scenario out there. There might come a time where we turn away from you, and it causes us to be led away captive. Now, somebody go and look at Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10 for us. And this kind of gives an idea of why it is that Daniel is so diligent to pray. Think about where Daniel's at. Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10.
When Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with his window open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, and as his custom was since early days.
Okay, so Daniel's in this situation now. We're fast forwarding a good bit, and they have been led away captive. And actually, the people who knew Daniel were like, okay, well, we can catch Daniel in a trap. We just set this law against him, and he's going to fall for it because he's going to continue to pray to God. Why was he continuing to pray, and what purpose did it serve in his mind? I mean, you think about where he's at, even as Solomon has just stated in 1 Kings chapter 8, if this is the case, if we are led away. Now, fast forward all the way to Daniel, he's looking at this like, this is my source back to God. Turn back to Jerusalem. Turn and pray toward this temple. It's the very same things that Solomon is stating within this prayer. Very instructive. Now, they should have took these things to heart. But the big problem is, who is it that really first starts to turn away? The king. The leaders, right? Now, as we work through this text, we'll make some more statements about this, but Solomon seems to really understand the law. He really understands what's expected of him. He seems to really understand what is expected of the nation. And any time that there is any wrong, they need to turn to God and pray. Ask his forgiveness and he will not forsake them. Continue working through our text. You see the part where it said in verse 50, forgive them and grant them compassion before those who took them captive? Think about what takes place at the beginning of the book of Ezra. Anybody remember what takes place right there in the first several verses in the book of Ezra? King Cyrus was moved within his spirit. Now it's at that point where they have been taken away and they're actually going to have the opportunity to go back and begin to rebuild. But all of these things that you see before and after all of this, you can continue to see what will take place if they turn back to God, if they continue to pray to God, pray toward the temple. And the main thing that I kind of want us to see here is how important was this temple to the people. I mean, this was their mediation point between them and God. This was where they would always turn and they would pray toward this temple. Ultimately, their prayers are being heard by God. Now think how devastating it would be when the temple is destroyed to that people, to them in that time. In their minds, it's like we lost this connection. We lost this contact to God. Now, he had told them the whole time, as long as you will keep my commands, as long as you will follow in my commandments and my statutes, I will not forsake you. Solomon's aware of it, and he has very clearly laid that out to the people within this prayer. And all of it made possible by God. Verses 51 and verses 53. Verse 51, for they are your people, your inheritance, whom you brought out of Egypt, out of the iron furnace. Now that's a statement that ties back to Deuteronomy 1 that actually Moses made when he referenced Egypt as that iron furnace. And here it is, Solomon making that same reference, but it ties back to God being the one that pulled this people out of the land of Egypt. There in verse 53, for you separated them. God made all of these things happen and has provided them all of this as the one that provides them forgiveness, has set them up as this great nation that they are. And what's their responsibility back to him? Obedience. I mean, we've heard it again and again and again as we work through the text. God's actually going to appear to Solomon one last time and give him some final reminders of what he needs to do. It sure seems like he has things figured out at this point. It doesn't seem like there's any way that he's going to turn away. What kind of lessons does that provide for us? Take heed lest you fall, right? Absolutely. You know, godly leaders, and take Solomon in this instance, he has a very clear understanding of the word. He has an understanding of the law, but he still has to apply it to himself just the same. He's going to be the one that leads the people away. Just the same, we can do the same, yes, sir.
And I find it amazing that even though Solomon, he does make a mess of all things, but God still through the Spirit uses him to write Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Like no matter where he was faltering, he was still of use to God. And I find that to be very comforting to us because no matter, man, we're going to fail. We're going to fall on our face. But, you know, as long as you get back up and you realize and you turn back to God, that God's going to continue to use you. That until you take your last breath, you're still of use to God, no matter what, as long as you keep turning back to him. And I see that with Solomon and later in his life in Ecclesiastes where he's like, well, I tried everything, but let me tell you what it comes down to. Follow God and keep his commandments. You know, right. This is the all in all. And I meant just how many regrets he had because this is how he starts out. And then he falls on his face time and time and time again. And then he ends with, oh man, okay, I've done all this, but here, let me point y'all back to what it should have been the whole time from the beginning for me.
Right.
You know?
Well, if all we had as far as knowledge of what Solomon did and who he was, if it cut off right here where it's about to in the book of Kings, we might think, man, he was lost and gone, right?
Yeah. Because
of these other writings, we do have understanding that, okay, well, there must have been a point somewhere along the way where he had a little bit of a different opinion about things, change of heart, if you will. But he was in this great position. The kingdom's at its greatest that it will ever reach, physically speaking, in this time frame. And he's going to be the same one who leads them down the trail to begin causing all the destruction that they're going to face. But nonetheless, beautiful prayer. Truly is a beautiful prayer, very instructive. And we'll jump into verse 54. And we're going to start seeing God's promises. Now, Solomon's prayer is done, but he's fixing to turn now and he's going to address the people. Everything that we've seen all the way back to verse 22 is Solomon before the people praying to God, and now he stops his prayer and he's fixing to turn and he's going to speak to the people now. If someone will, read verse 54 through verse 56 for us, please.
And so it was when Solomon had finished praying all this prayer and supplication to the Lord, that he arose from before the altar of the Lord, from kneeling on his knees with his hands spread up to heaven. Then he stood and blessed the assembly of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be the Lord, who has given rest to his people Israel. According to all that he promised, there is not failed one word of his good promise, which he promised through his servant Moses.
Thank you, sir. So immediately after Solomon has finished the prayer, he then turns to the people. He's been kneeling. He's been praying before the people with his hands spread to heaven, it said in verse 54. And then he turns and he stands and he blesses the assembly. He turns and he starts this little bit of a speech, if you will, toward them. And he reminds them of the rest that they have received. Now, this would also tie all the way back to the book of Deuteronomy. If somebody will, look at Deuteronomy chapter 12. Read for us Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 8 through 12. Remember, all these things were foretold. These are things that Moses had told the nation, this is coming. This is what you can expect when you go in and you are obedient unto God and you fulfill his will. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 8 through 12.
You shall not at all do as we are doing here today, every man doing whatever is right in his own eyes. For as yet you have not come to the rest and the inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you. But when you cross over the Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies round about, so that you dwell in safety. Then there will be the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide. There you shall bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave of sacrifice, or the heave of faring of your hand, which your choice offering, which you vow to the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, and your sons and your daughters you make, and female servants, and the Levite who is within your gate, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you. Take heed to yourself that you do not offer your burnt offerings in every place that you see.
Thank you, sir. It was told long ago, before they ever even entered into the promised land, there's going to come a time when you do everything that God is wanting you to do. He's going to be the one that's leading you in. You will be victorious. There will come a day when he's going to pick the location where his name will be. There's going to be a rest that you're going to experience. You're going to experience this peace and these good times. Now, you look within the text there in 1 Kings, and Solomon is stating when he turns to the people, blessed be the Lord who has given rest. What else is really amazing about it is, look at the last sentence within that verse in verse 56. The reminder, there has not failed one word of all his good promises, which he promised through his servant Moses. Everything that he has said, all the way back, as far as you go back, everything that God has stated, everything that he has promised you, everything has happened. Everything's been fulfilled. How comforting is that for us? You think about God, he cannot lie. He cannot offer a promise and then not fulfill that promise as long as we do our part, right? And we take great comfort in that. But there's two sides of that coin. Right? Just the same as we take comfort, and even as he is pointing the people here, he's saying, look, he's the one that has given us this rest. He's the one that has kept every word that he promised us. He's the one that has done that. Now we have to see that for the good and the bad. Just the same as he has done it in these promises where they receive all this good. The same goes for the other. The things that he has promised will come for those who are disobedient. All the instruction that Solomon gave within that prayer. If we do this, if we do that, it's us who separates ourselves from God, not the other way around. God's fulfilled his part. He's done everything. Continue there, 1 Kings chapter 8. Someone will read verse 57 through 61 for us.
May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us nor forsake us, that he may incline our hearts to himself, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, and his statutes, and his judgments, which he commanded our fathers. And may these words of mine, with which I have made supplication before the Lord, be near the Lord our God day and night, that he may maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people, Israel, as each day may require, that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God, there is no other. Let your heart therefore be loyal to the Lord our God, to walk in his statutes and keep his commandments as at this day.
Thank you, sir. You know, being close to God always increases our ability to keep his commandments, right? The closer that we are drawing to God, the greater chance we're going to have to keep his commandments. Well, if you look right there at verse 57 and verse 58, it's kind of, I don't know, the first time I looked at it, the wording or the way that Solomon has made this statement, it's, I don't know, a little strange to me. May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us nor forsake us, that he may incline our hearts to himself. Now, yes, the Lord is going to be with them as long as they do their part. But it's almost like Solomon is saying, okay, may the Lord God be with us, jump to verse 58, that he may incline our hearts to himself. I don't know, it's kind of interesting in the way that's stated and the way it's worded. The reality is God isn't going anywhere. He's there as long as they do their part. They've already made the statement. He has held every promise that he has made to them. It's been fulfilled. That rest that he told them they would receive, and now it's almost as if Solomon is saying, I don't know, when I first read it, and maybe it's just me, does that sound a little strange to y'all, verse 57 and verse 58, the way that that's actually worded? Yes. To the best of my understanding, in the sense of let our hearts grow closer to him, that's kind of my thought on it. But it was just kind of strange the way that that is stated. And there's been some of the things that have been said throughout this prayer and even into this speech. And I think Dina was the one that kind of said something about it. It almost sounded like at one point Solomon was kind of giving instruction to God, right? And it was kind of, I don't know, it somewhat does sound like that in places, but at the same time, opening the prayer, you see all this respect and reverence given to God from Solomon. But here at this point, it's almost like he's saying, okay, Lord, you be with us, and you incline us to you. I think what we really need to see is that the closer that we go to God, the better off we are going to be in the sense that we will be able to keep his commandments. The further I pull myself away from God, the easier it's going to be for me to wander astray. We need to keep ourselves close to God if we're going to continue to be able to follow and walk in his ways and keep his commandments as he wants us to do.
And
Yes, sir.
Along with that, not just keep close to God, but keep close to God's people. The further we get away from God's people and the more we start missing church, this or that, the more it's okay. And we start pulling away, and then we're back into the world. And it's being surrounded. I always say stay in the middle of the herd, and the lions can't get to you.
Mm-hmm.
They're picking those that are on the outside.
Yeah.
And it's not only stay close to God, but, stay with his people. And it's
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a great strength to be surrounded, by people who have the same desires, the same want to be close to God, to live a life that pleases God. It's going to help strengthen us being close to people like that. Yes, sir.
Well, and I think about it as well as far as there, verse 57 and how he's think back through all the prayer and how much of it deals with what we do when we sin. So there's obviously the recognition, the realization that we're going to mess up, we're going to sin. We know we can always come back, but also still the desire there that God would help draw us closer to Him. And of course, the purpose in that, as the verse plays out, is that we can be more faithful to Him, like you mentioned. If we draw closer to Him, we're going to naturally become more faithful in that. So
Right.
just that desire and the recognition that we need His help in the process through it all.
Right. Almost another mention where, or another statement by Solomon where he's recognizing what God will do. In the same sense, saying with knowing that He will uphold His part, we can draw closer to Him and our hearts will be inclined to Him in a sense, right? Yeah. Yes, ma'am. That's right. If you didn't hear, she was talking about Malachi, even as he was talking about John and how he would begin to turn the people's hearts toward God. And just the same, Jesus following that up, and he would do the same thing in turning the people's hearts toward God. I see, Bella, did you have your hand up?
I was just gonna say what I took out of those two verses, is basically what Preston said. But if we continue to stay close to God, then He's gonna stay close to us. So, the whole thing is you gotta stay with Him, and He'll stay with you.
Right. If we continue to stay close to Him, we know that He's going to stay with us. He's always going to be there as long as we're upholding our part.
As long as we keep His commandments.
Mhm.
God chooses
Right.
those who choose Him.
Right. Yes, sir. Oh,
Say,
Go ahead.
if you ever watch a charcoal fire,
mhm.
take one of those pieces out and lay it out by itself. And it starts to fade, die out. The further you move it away from the rest of it, the quicker it's gonna die. But if you take it before it dies out completely and put it back
Mhm.
in that fire, then it comes back to life.
Right. It immediately ignites again. Yeah, absolutely.
That's sort of the way it is, as Aaron said, us staying close to each other. Not
Mhm.
forsaking the assembly,
Right. Well, and even in this, Solomon, he's speaking to the entire nation. He said this prayer, he's given all this instruction through the prayer, and now he's focusing on the people, and he's saying, okay, here's what we need to do. Yes, sir.
Like several said, I see that the sense of inclining toward is drawing nearer or pulling me closer, but not in the sense, we sing the song sometimes, draw me nearer, 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 blessed Lord, but the idea is not that he's going to put an irresistible pull on you towards Him. That's not what we're praying. But what if I incline or move myself to study, to pray, to assemble, do all the things? What I will draw. He will draw me nearer because I'm what? I'm compliant. I'm doing what He asked to the utmost, and so I am moving toward God. He is drawing me nearer because I'm feeding on that lifeline that leads to Him.
Right. And even within this whole context, everything we're talking about is them and having this ability, this temple that is now finished. The ark is now within the temple, and now he's reminding them, here's where you turn, this is where you pray, this is your connection to God, if you will, this mediation point between them and God, and reminder of continue to grow closer to Him. Absolutely. All right.
This just makes Ezekiel even more sadder.
What's that?
This,
Bless you.
This whole thing, reading through this, it makes Ezekiel, when you read through Ezekiel, even that much more sadder.
Well,
He'd warned him.
Yeah, they had
Yeah.
all kinds of warning that what was going to take place. But even the warnings that we see then, there are warnings that go way back beyond that.
Yeah.
right? I mean, so many warnings that were given and so many times was stated so clearly, here's what you need to do. If you don't, here's what's coming. And sometimes when you work through a text, when you see, even as when we get to it, where God appears to Solomon a second time, it's almost like there's a little bit more detail that he provides than he did in the previous time that he, gave him these warnings. And it's like that warning increases just a little bit more detail and it's a little bit more specific. And he really should have caught the drift of what was about to come. But nonetheless, we're getting to the point to where Solomon's kind of reaching his high. The nation's reaching its high and they're fixing to start coming down the hill. Let's go ahead and let's discuss these last several verses. 2 verse 61, and then that'll probably be where we're going to close out today. Verse 59, it said, "And may these words of mine with which I have made supplication before the Lord be near the Lord our God day and night, that he may maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel, as each day may require." Now, when we get to chapter 9, this is almost in a sense, it's God's response back to Solomon. And we're going to see a statement made within there that, yes, I heard you. Yes, I hear what it is that you're requesting, and I'm here. But it's going to turn back to, are you going to uphold everything that I've asked you to do? It's going to fall back on him, almost as if God's going to get the last say, if you will. And then it's up to them, the ball's in their court. Are you going to do what I've asked you to do? Verse 60, "That all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God. There is no other." Now, remember what we're going to see as we work further into the book of Kings, and that's interesting in verse 60. Now, what we've been focusing on, other than one spot within that prayer, is all about the nation of Israel, about their relationship with God. Within that prayer, Solomon did have this one statement about the foreigners who might turn and pray toward this temple. And the reality is that they could pray and they could also have that relationship if they were willing to fully submit unto God. And now he has a statement at the end of this speech that's saying that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God. There is no other. We're not talking about something that just affects the nation, not just talking about something that that affects those who he has pulled out of Egypt. But this is a place, this is a location that will have an impact on the entire world at that time. That's something pretty great. Now, go back to what's going to take place. How devastating is it going to be when they knew everything that they needed to do? They had all the answers, they had all the instruction, and how devastating would it be to see that temple destroyed later to them? Now, tie that to us. We have all the instruction. We have a temple. We have Jesus the Christ. We have this kingdom. God's given us everything that we need. He has upheld every promise that he has made. The ball's in our court. What are we going to do with it? And how devastating would it be to fall short? Yes, sir.
The thing about, too, with Solomon, just where it is he ends up based on what we see in the Kings, how the desire here is to glorify God and to let the whole world be able to see that God alone is God, there's no one else.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, by the end, he'd completely forgotten that purpose to glorify God and God alone.
He sure did. It seemed like more about him and his desires and his wants, and it slowly pulled him away from glorifying God. Well, that gets us through, we'll say, verse 61 of 1 Kings chapter 8. We'll pick up in verse 62 next Wednesday. Thank you for your attention.